On today's show, the Capitals are giving Andrew Cristall every opportunity to succeed.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about position battles. And if there's one position and one storyline that has me intrigued the most, is will Andrew Cristall make the big team? What did we learn today? I'll talk about that a little bit later. I will talk about line combinations and position battles. Listen, this training camp, these preseason games have been very interesting, and there are a lot of players out there that are vying for positions. Who ultimately will break camp with the team and join the Capitals this season? I'll talk about that. And then a little bit later, I'll talk about the contenders and potentially pretenders. But just to get it going here, talking about Andrew Cristall. It is one of the stories that I followed, with quite anxiously and optimistically, I guess, as a back and forth going between the two that, I hope this guy can really make the team. But does he have what it takes? He's only 19. I kind of went back and forth in my mind if he has what it takes. And even before, the training camp started or any of these preseason games, I think that Spencer Carbery was intrigued at the opportunity of having that young star join this team. And he's the guy that put in the work. We know that he is not the biggest guy out on the ice. And we know that he struggled with skating, but he's worked on those things. He's rectified that. His skating is very good, much improved over what we've seen in years before. Good bursts of speed. He's put some mass on that. I think that he has seen what he needs to work on and addressed it. And the Capitals have noticed it. It's not just those kind of things. It's also his play on the ice. Is there actually the possibility that Andrew Cristall breaks camp with the team? It's trending more and more in that direction. And Cristall has 2 options for where he'll play his hockey during the 24-25 season. He can either join the Capitals or return to the WHL Kelowna Rockets. And when I take a look at it, I think to myself, I think that he has learned everything that he could possibly learn playing in Kelowna. I think he's actually played out of that kind of play, not to say to diminish what goes on with the Rockets there, but I think that he has taken steps forward that I think playing on the bigger stage, playing around premier talent, I think will only take his game to the next level. Now, to be clear here, if there wasn't the rule in place that he couldn't go to Hershey, I would say that is probably where he would have started the season if there wasn't a rule that prohibited it. But taking a look at it, his play on the ice, all things considered, has been really, really good. Impressive. If he chooses to stay in the NHL, he'll have the opportunity to play up to 9 games for Washington before his entry-level contract officially begins. Now, when I say he'll be given the choice, actually, it will be Spencer Carbery and Chris Patrick, those kind of things. But it's ultimately is his decision. It's how he chooses to play that he is going to have the opportunity potentially to play 9 games for the Capitals before his entry-level contract officially begins. So what is he going to have to do in those 9 games? He is going to have to bring it each and every game. And I don't doubt that. I don't have any doubt in my mind that he will not do just that. He's done that so far. There's been a lot of people, I'm even talking Capitals beat writers and podcasters out there that, hey, this is a good story. Let's get a look at him in camp and a couple preseason games. And then, he'll go down to the Kelowna Rockets, and that's where he'll end up going. He has exceeded everyone's expectations. And for me, I saw it the first game I saw him play with that breakaway potential goal where he was trying to go 5-hole. That was one of the things that, like, wow, this is a different Andrew Cristall than I remembered from the season before, taking a look at some of the different footage, that his skating has taken steps forward. His hockey IQ is there, and a great playmaker are some of the things that really pop off the page for me. So, but talking about that Capitals roster decisions, the Capitals are facing some tough decisions as they approach the deadline for setting their opening night rosters. And I don't think that it's going to be known until the first game to start the season. We know we got Boston next, and then it's off to New Jersey. And in that time, it is going to be a lot of mulling over. I imagine it's going to be Spencer Carbery bouncing ideas off Chris Patrick and his assistants and taking a look at footage and just, kind of just trying to make the best possible guess of what's going to work. And, some people would say, well, guess that they know what they want. When you take a look at it, it's kind of taking all the data, extrapolate all of it that you possibly can, and make the most informed decision that you possibly can. And I think that Andrew Cristall, if he continues on his current trajectory, I think he very well could crack the roster. Talking about his performance, one player at the center of this decision-making is Andrew Cristall, who has been making a strong case for himself during the training camp. At 19 years old, he faces a crucial season where he must either secure a spot with the Caps or return to the Kelowna Rockets, like I talked about, as he is not eligible to play for the AHL. So in a lot of ways, the ball is in his court. If he blows it, then of course, we know he's going to get sent to Kelowna. But if he continues and even improves on what we've seen thus far, I think that the ceiling on his potential, his trajectory it's an arrow going straight up into the sky. Talking about impressive performance during training camp. With an impressive performance during the camp, Cristall has caught the attention of Spencer Carbery and his staff, positioning himself as a strong contender for a coveted spot on the team. So, Dan, where is he going to fit? That's the question. I get it. And ultimately, who else? And I'll touch on that a little bit later, is I think that a lot of it is going to hinge on Sonny Milano. And you're like, where does Sonny Milano? Well, he plays left wing as well. And what we've seen from Sonny Milano has been okay, just okay. But I think that Andrew Cristall has been better than okay. Now, it wasn't too long ago that I thought that Jakub Vrana was going to be the guy to break camp with the team, not considering the possibility that, hey, maybe Milano, maybe he's expendable, that potentially there could be two roster spots that, if we do have Cristall on the big team, he can get some decent playing time. Because make no mistake about it, if it meant him spending a lion's share of his time as a healthy scratch, I would say he would be better utilized playing in Kelowna. My kind of hunch is, or me kind of looking into my crystal ball on the Capitals, is that's one possible scenario, is that Sonny Milano doesn't make the team, and then that would be Andrew Cristall playing in that spot, and Jakub Vrana would be that extra player. And Spencer Carbery, he's fully in on this whole Cristall thing. His face kind of lights up, and he has a look in his eye like he knows something that we don't. I really think he's going to break camp with the team. And talking about Carbery's comments during the interview, Coach Carbery emphasized the hard work and dedication shown by Cristall in the camp, highlighting his impressive performance in preseason games. Carbery acknowledged that Cristall has exceeded expectations, exceeded mine as well, and positioned himself as a potential team member, despite initial projections for him to return to Kelowna for further development. And this reminds me of a few years ago where it was the same story with Alexei Protas. He was a guy that, was at camp, but there was never any real hope or plans for him joining the team, but he played so well that the Capitals couldn't send him down to Hershey in that case. I think it's a similar situation here that, Andrew Cristall has made a name for himself, and he's put his name out there is like, no, I am a legit option to be on this team. I'm no consolation prize. I am no, participation ribbon. I am here because I earned it. And ultimately, I think that is why he's going to break a camp with the team. And, this is what I was talking about, the Capitals extending every opportunity that they possibly can. If Cristall secures a spot on the team, he will be granted that 9-game trial period before a decision must be made regarding his entry-level contract. This trial period will allow the team to assess his performance and potential impact at the pro level. So the ball's in his court. If he kills it, I think they go ahead and keep rolling with him. If his play is mediocre or a little bit less, then maybe he will get reassigned. But in any event, the ball is in his court. It is up to him to make a case and be an advocate for himself and say, hey, I'm deserving of this. I deserve to be here. And what we've seen thus far indicates that that is the case. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about line combinations, and the battles taking place on the ice are fierce. I'll dig into it straight ahead. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And it's one of the things that's frustrating for me. My favorite band comes to town, or my favorite stand-up comedian, and I can't find tickets. Or if I do find tickets, what is the view of the stage going to look like from where I'm sitting? So go with Game Time, as they make finding tickets a lot easier. They take the guesswork out of it with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure and be one of the Locked On Capitals insiders. I will have insider information. I will have exclusive video and short form podcasts. Just check out the link in the show description. All right, in this next segment here, we are going to talk about the battles that are taking place out on the ice. We've seen it. In the previous segment, I talked about Cristall, but there's Miro, there's Scarbosa, there's McElrath. There's a lot of different balls in the air, if you will. And talking about line combinations, during the training camp and preseason, the Caps have been carefully crafting and fine-tuning their line combinations. While most of Spencer Carbery's trios have shown promising chemistry, there remains some uncertainty around specific combinations. Most notably, I would say, is the third line, and ultimately how that's going to shake out. And, to a certain extent, I would also say the first line, I had it kind of sketched out that it was going to be Ovechkin, it was going to be PLD and Wilson, but now it almost appears that it's going to be McMichael, it's going to be PLD and Wilson on that second line, and the top line will be Ovechkin, Strome, and Mangiapane. Of course, the fourth line would be Dowd with Duhaime and Radish. So the kind of the variable, I guess you could say, would be that third line, and with LaPierre and what is going to take place there, Milano, Protas, these kind of things. Ultimately, who is going to be that cream that rises to the surface? And like I've talked about, and is kind of what this show is all about, is the battles. And, you're not just going to be given a jersey and go out there and play, unless maybe your name's Alex Ovechkin or Tom Wilson or something like that. But for, a lion's share of these players, you're really going to have to make an impression on this team. And I think that, to a certain extent, Sonny Milano kind of thought to himself, hey, I'm here. I'm an NHL pro, but, there's a lot of guys kind of chomping at his heels saying, not so fast. I think I'm better than you. And I think I'm going to be better than you. And I might even steal your job. And I think in a lot of ways, that is what is taking place. let's dig into the top six, the meat and potatoes. In the top six, Alex Ovechkin has been leading the charge alongside Dylan Strome and Andrew Mangiapane. When you take a look at it, I think that primarily what is going on there is familiarity, that Alex Ovechkin and Dylan Strome are familiar with each other. And one of the things that Alex Ovechkin talked about in a postseason presser is he felt like he lacked chemistry with some of the centers that he played with. Like I've talked about on the show, if you're an everydayer, that he had that chemistry with Nick Backstrom for so many years. Of course, he stepped away from hockey indefinitely. So that is what they're trying to do on that line. I think it's pretty good. I think that there are some things that could change. I think we might get a look at PLD on the top line. I think we might get a look at Wilson on the top line. But taking a look at the second line with McMichael, PLD, and Tom Wilson, I like it. Two big frames out there. I think that is a good fit. Pierre-Luc Dubois has been pretty stellar, I guess I'm going to say, in the small sample size that I've seen from him thus far. And Tom Wilson does what he does best, so that kind of opens up an opportunity for Connor McMichael to score some more goals as well. Meanwhile, that second line has seen the emergence of a formidable trio in Connor McMichael, PLD, and Tom Wilson, demonstrating a notable level of cohesion and synergy. So, when I take a look at it, I'm talking about the forward line combinations. It's that third line, which I think is tentative. I think that it is subject to change, and I think that it will change at some point, especially being that I'm talking about Jakub Vrana. I'm talking about Cristall, these kind of players, and Miro for that matter. It's going to be interesting to see exactly what happens there. Talking about the other big things is the bottom six. That is where it gets rather interesting. In a recent interview in Columbus, Coach Carbery discussed the performance of the Caps' bottom six. He highlighted the success of the fourth line featuring Duhaime, Dowd, and Radish, emphasizing their significant impact on the team. While praising their performance, he also mentioned that the third line is still, like I said earlier, a work in progress. The third line is a little bit of work in progress. That's the kind of spot we've been eyeballing and trying to evaluate. I think, again, it's subject to change. It is a work in progress. This is an insight provides a glimpse into the coach's strategic evaluation of the team's lineup and his focus on optimizing the third line for future success. Because all things considered, I'm talking first, second, and fourth line. I sign off on that 100%. If someone put a proposition in front of me and said, Dan, what do you think of this? I would say, I think that looks pretty good, at least to start the season. I think that that definitely is a winning combination. Again, but there are a lot of different scenarios at play, and ultimately who are going to be those players that rise to the top. I've talked in the show, I hate to have favorites, but I do like the game of certain players out there. Like I talked about Cristall, I'm talking Miro, even Scarbosa, I think is in the mix, kind of a dark horse candidate out there, that it is going to be interesting to see ultimately who is that cream that rises to the top. All right, so coming up here after the break, I'll talk about the left wing and the third line. There are a lot of different scenarios. Which one is going to play out? I'll discuss straight ahead. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And listen, there is a lot of football that's being played on any given Monday, Sunday, Monday, or Thursday for that matter. And say you're watching some of those games, and I know that most of you have your own favorite teams. I have my favorite team, but say you're watching a game and you're not really interested in any of the teams out there. How about open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game? All of a sudden, that game got that much more interesting. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the left wing position is one that's a bit in flux. You take a look at Connor McMichael, penciled in to be that second line left wing, but he can also play center. Will we get a look at him at center? at some point, just based on injury and line combinations getting all shook up? Absolutely, I think that's going to be the case. You take a look at Sonny Milano. Again, a big question mark is above his head when I see him skating out on the ice. I don't know if you guys see it. Maybe it's just me. That I don't know if he is that guy that is better than a Cristall, a Vrana, those kind of players. And maybe we'll see, something from him against Boston, or, say he makes the opening night roster that I haven't seen thus far, because that would kind of fit the script with Sonny Milano. Is there's at points where he'll go a stretch of games and be like, wow, who is this guy? He's really, really great. And then there's sometimes that he is, lackluster. And you're like, why do they have this guy out on the ice? That is what is exciting. And what I'm going to talk about next is the left wing position. Carbery has carefully analyzed his options for the left wing position. Despite initially considering Sonny Milano for the role, Carbery has expressed that Milano's performance in the preseason has been just okay. If I was Sonny Milano, either I would be brewing with confidence and say, yeah, I'm good. I'll show I'm okay. Or I'd be thinking, I better need to put some work in. I better, either hit the gym or get some extra time on the ice and shooting drills and whatever I got to do to get myself ready. Or I could very well be the odd man out. There is nothing certain on the Caps right now. As a result, Carbery is now considering other potential candidates for the position. I wonder who that could be. I think you all know who I'm talking about. Talking about contenders and perhaps pretenders. One notable contender is Jakub Vrana, Jake the Snake, who is currently on a PTO at the training camp. Vrana, a former first-round pick in 2014. Some people forget that he was a first-round pick. So the ceiling and the hopes for him were rather high at one point, and they kind of are again. Has been putting in a significant effort to make a return to the team. He definitely kind of changes the outlook of this team that needs, was said for the longest time, needs to get younger and faster. Well, Jakub Vrana definitely helps in one of those regards in speed. His hard work has not gone unnoticed, and he remains a strong candidate for the position. Additionally, even Miroshnichenko and Cristall have also emerged as potential candidates for the left wing. We can't forget about Miro. And, when I talk about Vrana and I talk about Cristall, it is not to say that, Miro's game isn't as good. In some regards, I think it's even better. I still think that, he's not fully cooked. He's not well done. If I would rate him as a burger or a steak, I would say that he's medium well. And he still needs a little bit more time on the grill. Or, if we're really talking about meat, go ahead and take it off the grill. You don't want to eat it fully cooked. But in any event, I think that, when I take a look at Cristall and I think at Vrana, I think that Vrana is that good extra skater. And I think that Cristall is the guy that could very well be on the lineup night in and night out. And I know that's a lofty goal for a 19-year-old with not a really proven track record in the NHL or any really, but I have that kind of faith in his game, and I think that he will excel, and I hope I'm right at the end of the day. But talking about that decision-making process with internal competition heating up and just one preseason game remaining, can you believe it? They were all kind of clumped together, and then they had a bunch of time off, and then there's going to be the final hurrah with the Bruins. Carbery is carefully weighing his options for the upcoming showdown with the Bruins on Saturday. He plans to utilize the remaining training camp practice sessions to assess which player best fits on the left side. Now, my hunch on it is I think to myself, I would like this to be a dress rehearsal. I would like to see this almost exclusively starters. However, I see what has shaken out across the National Hockey League. I'm talking Laine. I'm talking Doughty. There's other guys out there. Those are the two that pop off the top of my head that I could think of no worse case scenario than a Tom Wilson, an Alex Ovechkin, one of these players that you had circled for greatness in your mind gets injured. Do you think that the fortunes of the Canadiens have changed with Laine out of the lineup? Absolutely. Do you think the fortunes of the LA Kings have changed with Doughty out of the lineup? Absolutely. And, that's one of the things that was drawn into question I heard this on the 32 Thoughts podcast with Elliot Friedman, and I forget the new host, co-host name, but they were talking about maybe, having a conversation before the games that, what kind of, the competition, say they're playing the Bruins. Are you guys going to be putting, primarily veterans on the ice, or is it going to be AHLers? Because there is a certain code that Elliot Friedman spoke of that these young guys that they kind of know they don't have a spot on the roster don't go above and beyond and injure a player. I know I'm going a little bit in the weeds here, but if you saw that with Patrick Laine, that was definitely a case where I think that it was looked deliberate to me. So that's what I'm talking about, bringing it back here, the perils of preseason hockey. And, when I take, I want the big guys out there. I want to see what this looks like, but I could think of nothing worse than a player getting injured in a game with little to no significance. Ultimately, Carbery emphasizes that the final decision rests on the player's ability to prove that they have earned the opportunity, highlighting the competitive nature of the team's lineup decisions. The ball is in their court. Cristall, bring it. You need to really do this. Jakub Vrana, you're on a PTO. If you don't break camp with the team, I think that your future in the National Hockey League and maybe the AHL is up in the air. Now, and that's saying that about a former first-round pick, that it could be up in the air. And Miro, kind of a tragic thing if he doesn't break the team, as it seems like he's done his level best to make this team. And, I could talk about the blue line as well, and I did yesterday, and I will in upcoming episodes as well, is that who is ultimately going to shake out there? Is it going to be Alexeyev? Is it going to be Dylan McElrath? What about Ethan Bear? So many different storylines to follow. In this one, it has been primarily forward-centric, but those are the interesting storylines to follow for the Capitals. A lot of decisions need to be made between now and the start of the season, and between now and Saturday, to be honest with you, is what kind of lineup do you want to dress, and how many veterans do you want to put out there? A lot of decisions need to be made. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals and making it your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the 2024 NHL season preview on Locked On NHL, a 6-episode series bringing you the best local insight to make you the most informed NHL fan heading into the season. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that are listening on the audio side and watching this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team. It is every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.